Usually I let the guests announce themselves, but I've known you for a while, so I think I will do the introduction. Today on the podcast, we have a social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, a business owner, recently a real estate mogul. So,
Real
yeah,
estate
we have
mogul.
my mom, Jackie Muller.
Thanks,
So,
Jake, for having me on.
you're welcome. So, if you want to just, for the people who haven't known you their entire life, do you want to just tell them what you do and
Yes.
tell them about your business?
So, as Jake said, I'm Jackie Muller. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, owner of Dynamic Intervention Wellness Solutions, Hudson Valley's Family Counseling, located in Wappinger Falls, New York, right in the village.
Okay. But you started out as just a social worker, right?
Yep.
Originally.
When I worked for agencies, I was just a regular social worker, and then I advanced to a clinical social worker, and then started a private practice part time, and yeah, it kept evolving.
All right. Well, let's go all the way back then, and we'll start at the beginning. If you want to give people a little bit of insight about maybe your backstory, where you grew up, things like that,
Hmm.
and then let people know kind of some of your inspirations for getting into the therapy business and just being a therapist in general.
Okay. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, and my mom and dad lived in the Norwood section of the Bronx. It was primarily Irish Catholic neighborhood for the most part. And we moved up to Yonkers. You want that kind of history? So
Yeah,
we moved
yeah.
up to Yonkers, and my dad had his own business. So I always was familiar with that type of entrepreneurial spirit in the household because he was able to kind of come and go. And my mom worked as a administrative assistant and did that part-time when we were little, and then went into that more and worked with social workers. So when my father got sick and passed away early, and then my mom was raising just me and your aunt,
Mhm.
and my grandmother was in the household, and there was always this element of helping and serving others. Even though they were not licensed or educated in a field, they still were those type of women in the household, always helping other people whenever they could. And
So, would you say that that was your primary inspiration for wanting to become a social worker? Did you know early on that you wanted to do social work, or
I just never
how
knew
did that
anything
develop?
other than helping people. So even in high school, my friends called me Mother Hen.
Hmm.
As you've met some of my friends, and
Yeah,
they'll
Joey.
slip and they'll call me Mother Hen.
Yeah.
So my friends would come to me and be like, this problem or that problem, what do you think I should do? And I would always try to give them, like, my adolescent expertise. And it just kind of was part of who I am.
Okay. So when obviously, you mentioned going into high school and things like that, but when did you ever was there like an aha moment for when you kind of decided you wanted to be a social worker and
Well,
like started professionally training?
in high school, oddly enough, the guidance counselor at the time said to my mother I wasn't college material, to send me to secretarial school, and I would meet a husband, and she wouldn't have to worry about me. That was what they
Right.
did back in the 80s. So
Right.
I tried that plan. That didn't work out the way that they had planned. However, when I had your sister, your older sister, I decided I had to be a role model for her in some way. And your aunt and I had your cousin and your sister pretty closely together, 17 hours apart.
Yep.
And then your aunt said she was going to go back and finish her nursing degree. And I said, well, maybe I'll try something. And she kind of encouraged me to do that. So I would say your aunt's a big inspiration for me to go to college. She believed in me before I believed in myself.
Hmm.
So it's really important to have those types of people around you if you're trying to work towards a goal, is to have people that are motivating you. Otherwise, the other people, you may not be able to get rid of people out of your life, but you can maybe share your goals with people who are going to cheer you on,
Right.
and so I went to college, and I somewhere along the line I was in the writing I got into college. I was college material. Your aunt was very funny. She's like, you could read, right? And you like that art stuff, so just take an art class and an English class. And I did. And during the college experience, I was able to get into becoming a tutor in the writing center, and most of the time working with students trying to help them perfect their writing skills was that they had all these social issues going on. So I would try to find out, how do we remedy, this person has no access to typewriter, back then was typewriter,
Right.
this person has no access to, studying till late at night, what's available on the campus, where can they go, things like that. And most of it was solving the problems that were the obstacles to their academic success. So the following semester I looked in the syllabus and I was like, oh, to help people realize their full potential, 101, social work 101. So I took that, and it was a professor, Richard Holliday, who has since passed, from what I have learned. It's very sad because I would have liked to have thanked him for his teaching style, his love for the field of social work, his passion, and how he was imparting his wisdom to us, made me want to take another class and an independent study and like all those different things with that professor, as well as the rest of the professors that were at Lehman College in the Bronx. They were just phenomenal. And I think instead of going into college thinking I was going to be a teacher, which there's value in that as well, I felt I didn't really want to get locked into teaching math, science, history, or English. But what I was teaching was life skills.
Right.
And
Well,
oh,
a lot
go
of
ahead.
those things that you mentioned when you were saying that you were tutoring people, I feel like that's kind of what social workers do today. You're connecting people with tools, whether they be, physical, financial, or just emotional
Hmm.
tools, right, to kind of solve some of the problems and get past the obstacles in their life, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting to hear you talk about that because essentially, I think you were maybe even doing social work before you became a social worker because you were helping people, within the education system do that.
Right.
But now it's grown to much more just in a total general, like in general life
Mm.
skills, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
If you go with what you love to do, then you'll never work a day in your life. I forget who that quote came from,
Mm.
but it's really true. Like, I feel like I do what I have always loved to do, which is helping people, talking to people, listening to them, and being that sounding board. They may have a ton of people in their life that they'd like to just say it raw, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. However, that's not always possible because your friends and family have an invested interest in you being okay. So sometimes it creates a barrier to communication. So it's always good to have a sounding board that can be like, I think in this situation,
Right.
some, yeah.
Right. So you essentially started off. You mentioned that your advisor said you weren't college material. Now you mentioned a little bit about how you got past that and went through college. Let's fast forward now a little bit to what you're doing currently. Maybe we'll just jump ahead. So you've gone from essentially not being college material to now owning your own private practice for close to 15 years now.
I've always had, so when I graduated in 97 from Fordham University with my master's degree, so I went to Lehman for undergrad, Fordham for my master's degree. I always kind of had some little side hustle going on, dabbling in it just to learn enough
Right.
about the business.
But like
And
when did you officially start the business?
2007 was when I
Right.
formally became
Okay.
a business.
So yeah. Yeah, about what, 16?
Ten,
Is that 16 years now? I don't know.
yeah.
We don't. You guys can do the math, but yeah. So yeah, over a decade for sure. So you've essentially gone from not being college material to now owning your own business that's been massively successful for over a decade. You've purchased houses. You've purchased now. You just recently purchased a building for your office, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So for me anyway, I just think that's, you talked about, my Aunt Marilyn being your inspiration. I think for me, in a lot of ways, that has kind of been very inspirational to me.
Don't make me cry.
And no, it's fine.
We're gonna cry now, folks.
No. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the case that it's been inspirational to me. And also, when I think about the things that made me want to get into business and run my own business, it's definitely been seeing you run your business and doing all the networking things, meeting new people, and growing to now where you are today. Um, so initially, you started your private practice. It was just you, right?
Mhm.
And how many people are working within the practice now?
So I went from solopreneur, and now we have myself and three other full time employees. two clinicians full time and one practice manager,
Hmm.
myself, and then I have three other per diem or part time
Nice.
staff,
So like
five clinical staff.
clinical staff, and then one
Hmm.
administrative position too.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's awesome to see that growth. In terms of how you've got there, can you kind of talk about how you have expanded your business and some of the things that's helped you do that?
Yes. So one of the things I realized early on is I know enough to know I don't know enough. And I would ask questions all the time to people I saw were doing what I wanted to do. So someone who is even just slightly ahead of the game, who may know how to run a program, do whatever. I always ask questions. And if it wasn't for my friend and colleague Joyce Hurling, who let me rent her office as needed, no commitment, it was really just being a kind heart that she is as a social worker. And we still are friends today, and just spoke to her last week actually. Um, but that kind of support and again somebody believing in you and kind of giving you the knowledge that they had, like this is what you fill out to get insurance reimbursement, or how you got how do you get credentialed in. She gave me some of those like suggestions or phone numbers to call. And I found out really quickly that it's something that's missing in the education was the for a lot of fields they teach you what you need to do the actual work. They don't teach you the business behind the work. So I found myself like joining networking groups like Business Network International. I'm now a director in one of their chapters, and I've been in there for like 10 years. That I think has been a profound impact on my growth in terms of how to really build a network of other professionals that you can rely, know, like, and trust, so that they actually make you look good. So when my clients need things, I have tremendous amount of resources to guide them in those things that they may need in their family situations, lawyers, realtors, different people that can make life easier. And it helps to build that network. So building a network is helpful to you in any business, because like even you have someone come in, they talk to you about something that's just like a sound bite of their life, and
Right.
you can go, oh, I might know someone, let me call this person I know, they might know someone.
Right.
And that
So
network.
yeah, I mean, you mentioned BNI, and I know you're big into, in-person networking and having different business groups that you're a part of within
Hmm.
your community. A lot of the people that I've interviewed in the previous episodes, Joe Alfano, he mentioned, and we've been talking about the importance of social media networking and the opportunities that happen there.
Yeah.
But I think you're a little bit different in the sense that, not that you don't use social media, but I think you are a little bit more heavily involved in-person networking.
Right.
So how would you say that varies? And what are some of the opportunities that things like BNI have brought to you?
So it goes back to college, like the profound change that our society has had. I started in college where we had big giant screens that look, the old ones, the
Yeah, it took
desktops.
up the whole desk.
And we were taught how to like send a message from this computer to that person in the front of the room. And we were like blown away, because up until then, the big progress was word processors. So you could just like type and go backwards. So, because technology has advanced, there's a lot of things that you can do from the comfort of your own home, like we're doing this podcast. However, you can't beat meeting people in person and like actually, what do they call it, pressing hands
Just
together and
shaking hands
shaking
and
hands and seeing the dynamics of people in a room, walking up to someone, introducing yourself, repeatedly telling them what you do. It just builds a level of public speaking and comfortability and
well,
confidence.
yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense too, because even just for like this podcast, a couple people have asked me if I'd be willing to do like Zoom podcasts or virtual. And while I'm not totally opposed to it, I do think there is something to being in the same room as somebody. You're not, just typing through a screen. I mean, obviously not for a podcast, but you're not talking through a screen.
Hmm.
You don't have glitches and lags in the
Hmm.
program where somebody cuts out and you didn't hear them.
Hmm.
It's a lot more of a personal experience where you're actually able to, sit down
Right.
and talk with somebody and be in the same room.
Yeah. And that personal experience is really important, because I think that has what I've seen in the last decade is how it's transferred from that personal experience to social media. So now I have a group of people that I've known for pretty much a decade, right? And some I've known, maybe even before I even joined BNI. And those people have, because of the relationships we have, will now refer me, and now I can meet somebody like, I think Howie Gershon, who's a financial advisor, introduced me to someone who lives, where does she live? Way over in Pennsylvania somewhere. She's in the same field. We got on the phone. We start talking to each other. Who knows if that's going to be a good connection in the future? But like, the world has been made smaller and we're more connected. So my group, my home group, will see somebody on social media, say, like, because I live in Dutchess County, right? Dutchess County Moms Group, and somebody's looking to connect with a family therapist or some resources that one of my friends think I might have. They'll tag me on that post, and we've gotten people to call the office
Right.
because we have a network of people that then will see, oh yeah, I agree, I think you should reach out to her too, and
Right.
we've done that for each other in the chapters where we're supporting one another through social media as well.
Right. But so what do you think though, specifically for just in-person networking, like your BNI events, and having those in-person meetings? What do you think the difference is, in terms of impact on your business? Have you seen, like, is it more impactful to meet in person? Do you see a difference when you're kind of networking with people online versus seeing them in person? Is there any
100% different.
different, and how so?
Yeah, I have not gotten one person that I've met only through social media make a referral to me.
Okay.
But I can say that I have had, in the 10 years of being in BNI, it has incrementally, because it was just me at first, then me and a couple of people, so incrementally it has changed. And I just did the statistics. I would say 10 to 15% of the income generated is through direct referrals, or now the lineage of those referrals. So like, you referred yourself, maybe, then you referred maybe a friend, and then that friend referred an aunt. So like, those referrals, because it begins to build a cascade of word of mouth referrals, which I
Right.
think is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too that you said that it's like 10 to 15% of your business, because I would think anyway
Just from that BNI.
yeah, but I would think anyway it would be much less, because just because of the fact that of what you do, providing therapy for somebody is not necessarily like, oh, I got this pen from this shop and it writes well. People aren't always going to be so open about sharing, like, whether or not they've gone to you or like just referring you in that sense. So it is interesting to hear that even given the business that you do run, you're
Mm,
still able to receive so much word of mouth networking and business that way.
right.
It's
So one of the
interesting.
core values in BNI is innovation and tradition. And I think that what that core value resonates with me and teaches me is I have to be able to have the traditional type of business that I want to create, which is family therapy, and then be innovative in the delivery. So creativity is a big thing for me. So when you're trying to get people to know you or your brand, you have to be creative about it, and don't shy away from something that maybe originally you think, that won't fly. You never know what's going to fly. I have literally created a knitting group and now have like 10 people that now know me and who I am, and they can talk to people and they can talk to people. So they may not be direct referrals to me as a therapist.
Right.
However, they may come and be a participant in the BNI chapter. They'll get to know me. They may have friends and family that need some services. Life has something happen, or I've offered like creative ways of offering mental fitness to people. Is I have a program that's peak performance for professionals, and what I teach is a form of positive intelligence, positive psychology rather, and cognitive behaviors that, if implemented, you can improve your performance in any area of your life. So that's not necessarily therapy, but it's therapeutic, and it is kind of married together, the two of them.
That's interesting. So could you maybe go into that a little bit more? I think that might be something that people who are listening to this might be interested in, something for professionals, for business owners, how do you think, or what are some of the things that you generally recommend for professionals,
Right.
psychologically, like mental health wise?
Right.
What are some things there?
So, I think a lot of people that maybe if you're watching Jake's podcast now, you're an entrepreneur thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, listening to other entrepreneurs, and they all talk about like I get up every morning at 5 o'clock and I exercise and I, do all these different things before everybody even wakes up. Being able to develop a contemplative practice, one where you allow yourself to be unplugged but tuned in to your own mental processes is really important because we all, like in the therapeutic world, it's called defense mechanisms. We just, by nature of being a human and living and having life experiences, even if you had the perfect family situation, stuff happens in the world. And sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay. And those things you can't prevent. And they create levels of trauma that can interrupt your ability to stay focused in life. So you have little traumas and big traumas. So little traumas are like, someone was mean to me, bullied me, and they can be big if they get out of control. But then you have big traumas like some of the things that happen like 9/11 and the shootings that we see and also things that happen to your person. So like if you got a victim of a crime or assault or something like that, they all kind of create a level of cloudiness in your thinking, right? So we have the gift of the five senses, and a lot of times just teaching yourself something that resonates with you using those five senses. Not everybody's going to want to ride a bike for 50 miles, but that does create a space of physicality. There's movement in that type of contemplative practice, but it's something you do where you're not plugged into televisions, no one's talking to you. I mean, to tell a little personal story about you, Jake.
All right.
Don't be worried. It was really just a thing that made me realize that even kids can get this, right? You were probably around 10. We were riding up the rail trail up from Wassaic. And I think on the way back, I'm like, hurry up, it's getting dark. We got to get back to the car. And you were just like zoned out. I said, what are you doing? You were like, I'm in the zone, you know? And you were
Yeah.
just probably thinking about like the trees going by or whatever. You were so like focused on whatever you were experiencing in that moment. And I think so all these successful business people are going to say you should meditate, but I don't think we tell people what that means. And meditation has always looked like om, like kind of chanting an om, and that
Hmm.
can be that. It could be singing, it could be riding a bicycle, some type of contemplative practice that unplugs you from everything else. Let your mind kind of come in and be laser focused and consider what you need for your person to be able to stay in that place of like centeredness in order to be able to implement the things that are creative in all of your life areas like career, finances, relationships, spiritual
Right.
practices, you
But
know.
but specifically as it relates to professionals, you're talking about taking that time to meditate or just find a more peaceful state, right?
Yeah, and that could take 2 minutes or it could take 2 hours, depend
Right.
or longer. So 2 minutes would look like I'm going to have my lunch. Take a lunch break.
Right.
I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm not turning on any technology, not checking social media, or making that like part of your plan is that you don't turn on your computer till 9 o'clock.
Right. I think that's funny you mentioned that because I was watching a podcast. I forgot which one it was. But David Goggins was on it. He's like a motivational speaker. I
Mhm.
haven't watched too much of his content, but he was talking about things like this, and he was asked essentially like he's somebody who's a very big proponent of like pushing your body to the limit, pushing your mind to the limit, like very extreme, the very extreme side of effort
Mhm.
and discipline,
Mhm.
right? And he was asked like, how do you balance that extreme discipline with just like your mental well-being and stuff? And he brought up an interesting point of having these mental aid stations. So he said like kind of what you were just saying, they don't have to be, it doesn't have to be your work, you're meditating for an hour a day.
Mhm.
It could be something as simple as the example he used was when he's in the shower. That's a mental aid station, just like a few minutes of your day where you can stop thinking about things,
Mhm.
just relax,
And
focus
be in the
on, yeah,
shower.
focus on the water. There's no phones going off or people calling you or
Mhm.
things that need to get done in that moment. He talks about taking those little moments and using those as a time to kind of recharge and relax in a
Mhm.
sense. So yeah.
So it's interesting because, like, I tell a lot of my clients, like, to schedule a few alarms in their cell phone if they forget to take these breaks, that they could just check in with themselves. How am I
Right.
feeling? What am I thinking? Am I feeling stressed out? Is my alignment and my posture sitting correctly so
Right.
that you're not like kind of at the computer like that all day?
Right. And I think that's also a part of it is just like people not realizing when that potential for that little break is in there too, because some people, like you mentioned with the alarms, sometimes you need something to tell you, all right, take a second to relax.
Mhm.
But I think some people miss the opportunity to naturally take a second to relax because they're not realizing the times when they can take those breaks. Like when you're eating
Mhm.
lunch, maybe just put the phone down and you don't have to check it. Or when you're,
Mhm.
if you're taking a shower, you don't need to be listening to, I know some people like listen to music or listen to podcasts and stuff. And it's like sometimes it's more beneficial to take those few minutes to just have no stimulation whatsoever. Like you're not listening to any information being said. You're not, um, you know, being influenced by alarms or anything like
Mhm.
that, right? You're taking those moments, those very brief moments, but you're taking them to kind of totally disconnect from from essentially the outside world of notifications and alarms
Right.
and stuff
Well,
like
you're
that.
trying to create a habit of mental fitness. So, just like we all are familiar with words like mental illness, mental disease, I think it's really more about mental fitness. And there's never, in my knowledge or my experience, has there been consistent explanation of why, say when I was a kid, why did we pray? Why did we say grace before meals? Those kinds of things that were maybe done but not explained with the intention of like being thankful for the food and considering where it came from. Having mindfulness moments throughout your day helps to reset the nervous system. So a lot of times, the easiest thing to do is when you're feeling stressed out is to look at your body alignment and to take a deep breath, because we're all operating under stress, whether it's a very mild stress or a very profound stress. We don't always pay attention to the level of stress our body is holding. And when you activate that stress response, it activates all the cortisols and all those things that make you feel anxious, right? And if we just think about any other mammal, if they're in danger, they fight, flight, freeze, follow, fawn. They just activate and go, right? And that takes quite a few hours to let the cortisols dissipate. So you could have had a stressful conversation in the morning and you don't even pay attention to it and you're still carrying it with you through the day. Something else happens, something else happens. It all compounds and you come home and then you bite off the head of somebody that you care about, right? However, if you are aware that you're starting to build up like that and you take these mindful moments, you can bring your stress levels down and you can peak your performance, because then you're going to be able to do better at whatever you're focused on.
Right.
And you could do that by simply taking like deep breaths, because taking a deep breath sends the message to the brain that you're not running away from a saber-toothed tiger or something. You're not
Right.
in danger of anything. It's just someone said a snarky comment. Take a deep breath, relax, remind yourself what your priority is for the minute, and then focus on that.
So a lot of these things are like physiological responses too
Absolutely.
to whatever stimulus you're experiencing, right? So
Hmm.
like you mentioned, if somebody cuts you off or says something nasty to you, that
Hmm.
that can affect you internally, and you might not even if you don't realize it, right? Like maybe you think that you've calmed down, but internally you're still kind of
Right.
affected by that.
It's like
So
people ask you how you doing, and everybody says fine.
yeah.
Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and egocentric. Most of us are not fine.
Yeah.
If you really said what you meant, you would be like, well, I'm feeling a little stressed out, or a little
Right.
pressure from my finances, or had an argument with this person and it sucked. If we went around and we were honest with everyone, you'd be talking to people all day long. So
Right.
we
You
have these shortcuts, but then you never pay attention to the fact that you're not fine.
right.
or
Well,
that you are fine.
that's like that Tom Segura joke. He has a joke where where he basically says like there's two appropriate responses to the question how are you? And he goes okay and fine. And he goes and nothing else because after that you're an asshole or whatever. He's like cuz it's true. He's like you don't burden people with your real world problems, you know? It's like it is that is the case. Like when people do ask that question, it's like a social greeting. It's not actually
Right.
um
But try doing
a
something
person.
different and see how you get a response from, I'm feeling fabulous, or,
Yeah.
excited to be alive, breathing in the fresh air. You're like, bring that kind of positivity, and you're going to be greeted with other people that say something in return. Well, that's wonderful. Instead of like passing you by and didn't even listen to what you
Right.
said, whether okay or fine.
Right. And I guess it does depend on the situation too, though. Like if you're talking to a friend and they ask, "How are you?" you might be more willing to
Hmm.
open up about that versus like if somebody just is literally walking past you and they go,
In
"Oh,
the
how
office or
you doing?" or
something. Yeah.
whatever, and it's like it's not necessarily an invitation to stop and
Yeah.
dump out all of your problems for an
Right.
hour.
Right. That's true.
But
Unless you're coming to see me, that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah, you can go to dynamic intervention and do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about the business. Obviously, you are the owner of Dynamic Intervention. We've talked about the growth that you've had so far in your time in private practice. So, what would
Hmm.
you say some of your business goals have been, and what are they currently? Like, how do you set
So
goals?
my business goals have always been to try to figure out how to do it, how to do the business piece, how to do it better, automate it. And if I could go back to earlier me, I would probably say that I should have taken the mantra that I now have and started that from the get go, which is delegate or die. If
Okay,
you don't, I mean, let's face it, who
but
doesn't want to?
what are the goals? What is like learning it? Like, what are these things that you're learning within your business? What are the functions within the business that you've been like kind of learning over the years?
So, one of the things that I've been learning over the years has been that in order to be able to have a business and be successful, people need to know you have a business.
Right. So
And if you're
advertising.
not somehow a presence in the public eye, then they don't know who you are. I might as well just like sit in, I don't know, sit in I might as well stay working for an agency and
Right.
been invisible in that agency. And people would just go, oh, we go to the health center for mental health care. And I would have been there, and that's fine. The health center would have been the advertising agency, right?
Right.
For the services. But when you own your own business, people need to know you're there. You need to put it out on a website. That was the first thing I did. Social media wasn't something I was familiar with till probably a lot later because it wasn't there in the beginning,
Well,
was
yeah, I
it?
mean, if you're talking about 2007, if you're talking
1997,
about 2007 for when you
2007.
started Dynamic Intervention
Yeah.
officially, there was social media, but it wasn't really as prominent as it was today, and it was mostly like
No.
personal application.
It was mostly
It wasn't
it
businesses
was
yet.
emails and AOL with the dial up. That
Right.
wasn't really,
Well, you've
you know.
gotten a lot of business from magazines, right? From Psychology
So,
Today and
Psychology Today is a place where people in the mental health profession can list themselves and all their expertise and the insurance companies that you can take. And we're up there as Dynamic Intervention. And there's also like the website. We have now social media on. We have Dynamic Dot Intervention on Instagram, and we have Dynamic Intervention Wellness Solutions on Facebook. So, like, those are places that we populate content that would be appropriate for families. Um, but being I was big 10 years ago when I started telling people what I did, then more people knew what I did. They told two friends and so on and so on. And it kind of grew like that. Um, so, marketing, learning the systems, creating systems within your business that work for you. And that's going to always be something that's a series of evolutionary changes that you make too. So I started where I had to fill out the forms painstakingly, try to pay you guys to do that. Remember back in the day, the paper ones,
yeah,
that organizing them for me, and
yep.
just the
I remember
information had to be
sending in
filled
some of
out.
the insurance stuff too.
Yeah.
Used to do that.
And it was all paper. Now we're
Right.
a completely paperless office.
Right. And I think that also speaks though to what you mentioned earlier in delegating, right? When you're creating a system, a lot of the times what you're doing is figuring out a series of steps that you can have somebody else take essentially. Like for me anyway, when I think of that, creating a system like within my business for M3 merch and printing t-shirts, the things that I have been doing, I haven't had the opportunity yet to hire somebody
Right.
to do the printing for me. But as I print, I'm always thinking about like how can I create a system where essentially somebody who has never done this before can kind of come in, learn the steps on how to make the shirts, and then consistently create the right result. Because that's the system of my business. Whereas, I mean, obviously, a lot of what you do is the clinician has is professionally trained, but
Yeah,
from the
but
business side of things,
the
you have to create
biz
that system.
right. The business stuff was something I needed to learn. And when I learned it and the things that I knew somebody else could do, could I do it? Yeah. But my time is better spent doing the time that's billable than it is doing the stuff that maybe um like creative in a sense. It still has to have my flavor to it or my voice to it so that I'm building the brand that I want in my business. But it started off with just saying, could you guys, like for 3 hours or 5 hours or whatever, I'll pay you to do this. That was back then when I was trying to put all my filing away and stuff like that,
Right.
whatever you guys did. But
So what you mentioned there is you're basically identifying like where you bring the value into your company, right? So you've identified that your value is primarily brought in from seeing clinicians, right? Or
mhm,
seeing clients and billing for those hours, but you're not necessarily um there's not as much value there if you're sitting there and doing some of the
playing
other
with
things.
Canva
Yeah,
and
like
stuff like
making
that.
newsletters
Right, right,
and billing insurance companies, right? Your
right.
your value comes in for making
Helping the people.
helping people, seeing your clients, right?
Right.
So that's I think that's important for a lot of people to realize too, because for any business owner, I think a
Mhm.
lot of people either fail to realize or they're misinformed or they don't really recognize the fact that they can basically create more value with their business if they just really focused on the thing that they're good at and learned to delegate the other tasks to other people. Like,
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I knew then what I know now, I would have tried to make more time, even if it was just part-time stuff.
right,
I dabbled with it a little bit as I was able to, but I think any small business, when you're starting out, you're afraid to overextend yourself financially, and you don't realize that you are freeing yourself up if you allow somebody else to do some of the things
right,
that they could do. And also, sometimes there's a series of events in life. You have people that can do it in your life and people that can't. You guys were a little bit unwilling, high school students to try to get to do those things. And when I was able to finally hire someone to do that, it took a weight off.
yeah,
But one of my things to caution is don't abdicate by your responsibilities. You have to stay on top of that too. I was so relieved to have hired this one woman that she almost ran my business into the ground because
mm,
I thought she's doing that. I don't have to worry about it till there was a cash flow issue, which sent the radar up. And I was like, there's a problem here. And when I looked into it, I questioned, and she found out that two of the insurance companies were not sending the reimbursements in for like 6 months.
right.
That was a problem.
But that speaks to the importance of making sure you have a solid system in place
Hmm.
before you delegate that task to the other person, right?
Yeah,
Because it's
you
not that you necessarily
have to
needed to
supervise.
micromanage. You didn't need to micromanage her, but you do need to be aware of what she's doing
Right,
and have a system in place just to double check so that you don't have to constantly be checking on if
right,
everybody's doing their job
right,
properly.
right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And now the person who does that, she's definitely like, every 2 weeks at least, we're in there looking at everything, what's gone out, what's come in, who's submitted their work on time. And we created a different system. So the cash flow is not something that we worry about like that anymore. Additionally, one of my clinicians, your sisters, we're a family therapy practice that's literally family. So, she's one of the clinicians that's full time, and when she first started it, she started part time and she did a lot of the things that I didn't have time if I'm talking to a client. And I would be able to say, could you call this insurance company, ask them these questions? Could you find out this so that we can find out if we can give you clients too?
Right.
So she was instrumental in doing some of the administrative clinical piece to help us find out how we could grow from solopreneur or solo practitioner to group practitioner.
Right. Yeah.
You need a team. You need people that you can delegate to so that while you're building this empire, right? I'm the
Right.
one that generates the most income, even still in the practice,
Hmm.
because I've had 25 years in the practice of people that I used to see at agencies found me outside, things like that. So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it speaks to it. And I saw the other day, I think it was Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. He
yeah.
was he was on Instagram talking about something, and he said, I never go into business, or he says, I'm always looking for a business partner. He never goes into business or a project alone, because he's also made that identification that it's important to have somebody else there to
Hmm.
basically cover your weak points. It might not even be a value issue. It could just be like, well, I'm not really that good at marketing the business. I'm really good at sales and closing sales and talking to clients, but I'm
Hmm.
not really that good at advertising, and I don't know where to put the money in to get the most results there. So finding, even whether it's a partner or making a system so that your employees can cover that,
Oh,
is
yeah.
definitely important.
I think that's why sometimes it works out well with me and your sister is because I'm developed the comfort level to just go out there, talk to anybody. And she's actually very bright with the clinical piece. And when we have had students or people that were entry level clinicians, she can be a backup for them when I'm not available. So that's really helpful too.
Right. Yeah, that's important. And I think when you were mentioning the story about not monitoring that person that you hired for the billing, it kind of brought up the thing that I've talked about with a few of the other people I've interviewed. And I usually ask them like to identify one of your biggest mistakes in business. So if you could think back from like basically from the time you started to now, what would you say your biggest mistake in business has been?
Would be that not paying attention to that and trusting that I hired someone who knew what they were doing because they were doing it fine and they fine again.
Yeah.
They were doing it fine, better than I was, right? Which didn't say a lot back then because I really didn't know what I was doing. I
Right.
was doing enough to make it manage, but not enough to go into full time private practice. Once I got rid of that person who was causing those issues and found another agency that was helping at first, that was helpful until that person that I was assigned to went out on maternity leave and something happened with that. And that situation didn't work out. And that point, I learned that if this is going to work, I need to create a system that works for me. And technology caught up with us at that point. So a lot of the stuff that needs to be done now for a medical biller is different than it was back then. Back then it was hiring somebody to do the paper forms. That person was not on top of that. Her life situation, I don't know. That's what she explained. Hiring a company that had people to do it, but they were not in state, they were out of state.
Right.
And I only knew them remotely. And then that didn't work out because there was something going on that I didn't know about till I couldn't access my person, my biller, and quickly caught on it. It wasn't 6 months. It was like literally like a month or two. And now because the technology has caught up, partially because it was catching up and then partially because of the pandemic, expedited everything
Hmm.
that we now have it integrated into the platform that we use, and like notes and billing and everything is done pretty much by you completing your work and it gets submitted like that instead of somebody paper doing it. And now we have our practice manager,
Yep.
your
Yep. My
other
other sister.
sister
Yep.
who was doing that for a dermatology office during the pandemic,
Right.
and we all know what happened there. And I said, just come work for me. You do that for them, come do that for me.
Right.
And that was really wonderful because there's a little skin in the game, like we're trying to make this thing work for the family.
And I think also it highlights another important factor, which is having just your tasks, whatever you're doing, having that in house. There is a benefit to that, not necessarily running it through an external person who might be, a practice manager or like an online personal manager who's doing billing for several people, or not hiring a company
Right.
that's
Hiring it in house.
hiring another company that's doing all of these other things for other
Yeah.
businesses,
Yeah.
right? Having that person within your business who can
Is
do
good.
that is
Yeah.
definitely a benefit, right?
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things too, for those of you considering hiring family members, just don't go hire family and friends because that relationship can be strained by this, and we have had our own bumps in the road. However, I think for us, both your sisters have worked other places first,
Right.
and then we're able to bring the skill sets that they learned with them into this position here, and it's not me having to train them from ground zero either.
Right. Yeah.
So let
Well,
someone else train your staff and then you hire them in.
yeah. Well, I think most of, I mean, from what I've learned just researching, and then I did take a couple classes in school on like family business dynamics and stuff like that. The thing that you learn in pretty much every case, and you can also, I guess, pull out examples in your case too, is that anytime you do hire a family or a friend, you're putting yourself at risk in a sense of cross contaminating those relationships, because there is a difference between a personal relationship with somebody and your professional relationship.
Mhm.
And when you have both, sometimes the lines blur, and then it's a lot harder to do a lot of things, whether it's
Mhm.
enforcing policy within your business or, time management, because
Right.
there's a little bit more flexibility.
And the
And I
thing,
don't think that's avoidable though. I think that's something you
yeah.
have to acknowledge will happen if you do really want to work with family and friends. You do have to acknowledge that there will be this like blurred line. I don't think there's ever a way to truly
That can
create that divide.
It's more challenging I think with family and friends. However, you can also have people that you really took on because you mentored them, and those relationships can be stuck because they had you as one type of a experience. Maybe like if I had students and stuff like that I did
Right.
their internship, and there's a sense of I guess pride that can happen when you get hired by your supervisor, and then sometimes that can fall apart too, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you're independent. It just means that your supervisor was continuing to want to provide you that opportunity. And those relationships, so like relationships are going to be different no matter which angle you look at it. Even if it's family, friends, someone you built a relationship with and you hire them in because you like them, you still have to take care of the relationship. And if it
Right.
doesn't work in this area, then somebody has to be wise enough to know that maybe this is not the right fit for that relationship, and you make a change with
Right.
that.
But I think it's also like the from what I'm understanding anyway, the example that you're pointing out is kind of more so a professional relationship becoming more personal
Yeah.
because you've worked with that person for a long time. And obviously, if you work with somebody, maybe you know, go have lunch, or
Mhm.
maybe you guys have common interest in whatever, so you go to a concert, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So you do end up developing a personal relationship. I think where the difference is for family members is you already have the personal relationship, so that's the
Right.
primary relationship that
Right,
you
right,
are
right.
familiar with and that you're going to operate off of,
Right.
right?
It can,
whereas
yeah.
whereas a professional relationship or a staff member or a coworker, whatever, you, for the most part, will always have that professional relationship as the foundation of
Right.
your overall like relationship,
Right.
and you'll be able to develop the personal kind of outside of that.
And for those people starting out in business, one of the things that I've learned along the way that perhaps, sometimes affects relationships is that you, you can't play favoritism in your business. Business is business. Your insurance is only going to cover you if you treat everybody equally. Everybody has the same expectations. Everybody gets the same treatment. Nobody's given special, favors. And sometimes that can cloud those personal relationships,
Mhm.
or there could be a lack of awareness that it is a business, it's not personal. If you're not a good fit for the business, I might need to let you go. And that's only because if I'm running a business by some of the guidelines that I've learned, the legalities of it, you have to think about the business surviving,
Right.
because there's other people working there too now, so
Hmm.
I can't have like there be openings for liability or any
Right.
kind of malpractice, that
Well,
kind of stuff.
I think part of that is the importance of having a policy, right? Because what a policy does, in a sense, I know for in most cases, especially for small businesses, it seems kind of stupid to have a policy. If you only have a few people working there, it's like, why am I going to write down this like handbook or whatever? And you don't need to necessarily have a handbook, but the importance of having some sort of like written set of standards, right? Some
Mhm.
sort of policy where you can point to and at least have
Right.
just an objective, these are the rules and these are the standards that we all have to follow.
Right.
That is one way that people who are working within like a family business or in
Mhm.
a situation where they are working with friends, I think that's definitely one way that
Right.
people can support that boundary and kind of create some sort of structure within that
So
where they're not getting like pushed around too
you
much.
said something important. So when people come and work for you and you start to be in a place where you can delegate responsibilities to other people, that person's coming and yes, they may have a relationship with you either prior or they develop one, but they also have a relationship with the other entity, which is the business.
Right.
And the business has these guidelines that are non-negotiable because of the way legalities are. You know, you can't play favoritism and I can't let you be late and everybody else has to be on time.
Right.
And there's nothing done about it. So, you know, just as much as you may want to be the person who helps everybody, I also have to think of my relationship to the business.
Right. Well, the other thing is what that policy does, or that set of standards. What that does is it kind of separates you from your business too. It creates, like you said, that
Right,
third party, that
right, right,
separate entity, and it takes some of the responsibility off of you. I think that's also
right.
like when you think about why we have written laws in society and stuff too, it's so that we've removed people from the equation.
Hmm.
And the reason why we uphold those laws is so that there's a even, or there's supposed to be an even standard that's
Hmm.
applied for everybody,
Right.
right? So that's the theory
And
behind it.
and it's kind of goes back to some of the things I learned in BNI. BNI rules and policies and procedures were developed and became developed and are member driven. It's not like some big corporation decided. It started off with four guys in a garage, Ivan Meisner and his friends, right?
Right.
And then they developed and met people, and as the groups grew, they developed, you know, ways that they wanted each of their little chapters to run. And if you go to a meeting in New York or Florida or Ireland or anywhere in the world, because it's international,
Hmm.
that meeting should run pretty much to the same agenda, you
Right.
know.
Because they have that standard.
Right. And
Right.
it's the same with like I sit on the Wappinger Falls Business Association now, and we have bylaws and guidelines that have been there and put in place to help run their, you know, initiative or effort that they have, which is advocating for small local businesses, with the local government and stuff to help with making the commercial area more viable and desirable to the community, in all those things that they stand for. But it couldn't be that if the board didn't come together, sit up, make some rules, and then have a lawyer look at it and make it into bylaws. So
Right.
it's important to have that in your business, even if it's just you and you don't have any employees yet. What are the standards and expectations? What are your values for your business? So I've talked about innovation, creativity, traditions, building relationships. Education is important too.
Yeah.
When you graduate college, the learning has just begun because everything you learned in college, you don't actually do all that in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I've graduated and I don't think I learned anything from school that really applies to what I do on a daily basis
Right.
in my business and in the other businesses that I've seen. And that's, I mean, that's a much larger conversation for another time for sure.
So then you did learn.
Um,
You learned enough that you didn't learn enough, and you have to keep
well,
on
yeah, I
your
mean, I
quest.
I learned that a lot of the experiences, um, a lot of the things you experience outside of school, those are the things that are going to help you more so than the textbook and
Hmm.
things like that, especially when you're talking about business where there's so many variables and so many situations. You almost just need to kind of go through those situations and be exposed to different scenarios within business in order to actually gain that experience and know what to do in the future,
So
right?
it
So
goes
like
back
you
to
look,
experience and mentorship.
yeah, and you look at a lot of people in business, whether they're really strong negotiators or good salesmen or whatever, the reason that they've become such good salesmen is not necessarily because they read about it. It's because they've been in 100 other sales meetings where they've eaten shit
Yeah.
and essentially messed up, and they've learned from that. And now when going into that 101st
Right.
meeting, they're going, well, I know not to bring this up and I know to steer the conversation this way and I know I
Hmm.
should highlight these points because the other times that didn't work, and now I have to do this.
So I think in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to be vulnerable in some ways. Vulnerability means that you're willing to keep getting up and trying and trying and trying. Most successful people are the biggest failures
Right.
because they don't stop trying to fail.
Hmm.
Because you fail forward, right? All these different expressions that you could probably hear. I don't know if you've read all these people yet, but like there is a definitely a lot of people that'll stand out there and criticize you for what you're doing. I mean, even people that are well-meaning. When I first started, your grandmother and
Right.
and your aunt to some degree,
Right.
she's like, "Oh, you're not gonna have a real job?"
Right.
Oh, I'm doing what I did for an agency only for myself. Like,
Hmm.
so it is real.
No,
Because
yeah,
why was it only real there if I work for corporate or if I work for, somebody else's business? Why is that more real than what I want to do here that I want to create for
right.
myself? You know?
Well, that's the experience of being an entrepreneur, and just being a business owner in general. And I think people won't necessarily understand your vision, which it's not a critique of them. It's just something you have to understand. When somebody's not working intimately on the project that you're working on, they're not going to be privy to all of the information
Right.
that you have, and they're not really going to understand it. So even some of those things that might come off as critiques, you just have to realize it's like, oh, well, this person just doesn't
Right.
understand what
Right.
I'm doing.
Right.
They don't have the same vision that's in
Right.
my head, and they will see it when when you take those steps and you grow the business to where it's at now.
Yeah.
Obviously people understand, oh,
Yeah.
this is what you were trying to do the
Yeah.
whole time.
Even when they're
And
saying that, it's just out of like concern for you, you know.
yeah, yeah,
My sister's always been my biggest cheerleader
yeah.
all along. She probably thinks I'm crazy, but you're doing what now? You're buying a building?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess how did you so we can talk about the building a little bit, and just that being part of your growth of the business, right? So how do
Yeah.
you manage your time and do all of these things, because you're a business owner, you're still a practicing therapist, you have a real estate deals. I mean, it's your house and this building now, but still you're doing all these things.
Hmm.
You're active within your community on the Wappingers Falls Business Association, BNI, all of that. So how do you divide up your time? Do you have any advice for people on how to
Yeah.
manage their time? Like, what would you
So
say?
prior to um, creating some time management and organization, I took a class. It was a Franklin Covey class or training on time management and organization. It was a weekend thing that me and one of your sisters did, and it was kind of interesting because somebody in there, one of the presenters said something like, your life is your life. So you can't have a calendar for your personal life, a calendar for your work life, calendar for this. You have to have one place where you keep track of everything that you do, and you have to be able to use it.
Right,
If I put my doctor's appointment on the refrigerator and then I have my work schedule here and then I have my networking schedule there, I'm going to forget, right? So I chose to use, like, now for my practice, because of HIPAA, we have to have certain securities around that, but it can sync with just initials into my Google Calendar.
yeah,
So I create a calendar, and in that calendar I have a power hour. Whether that power hour is 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the after, like whatever way I do it, in those hours, I put the things that I need to do just for me. So that might look like taking my lunch hour, I eat, I knit, I relax, things
right,
like that. But it's important to put yourself into your calendar and to have your whole life there so you don't drop a ball and then you stop having decision fatigue of like what do I got to do next.
right.
So food prepping helps too. Like if you have a busy schedule like I do, so that I don't have to stop and think about all that. So
Yeah.
avoid decision fatigue.
Well, I think also the important thing that you mentioned there is making the time to just have some time for you to do the things you need to do. For me anyway, I think of, if I have a big order, right? If I have to do like 100 shirts or whatever the order is, right? And I need to get that done, it could take me a couple days. But I also need to realize at the same time, like the thing that I have realized is that it's also important to not just solely focus on that order. I still need to work on the other aspects of my business, because at the end of the day, if I just do that order, like, yes, I could probably do like 2 12-hour days of just making the shirts, and I'll get that order done in 2 days. But what I've failed to do there is make time for planning for the future,
Right.
right? Make
Right.
time, whether it's, sending out more Instagram ads or more marketing. And then essentially
Yeah, time block.
I've lost the ability to do anything else. And now I'm
Right.
2 days behind on everything else. Whereas I could have just done a little bit here and a little bit
Yeah.
there
And
over a longer period of
it's
time.
industry specific too. So like in my field it tends to be a lot of the continuing education classes, although recently they've been sprinkling them in other places, was on Thursdays and Fridays.
Hmm.
And most of the bulk of my clients that I see is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for that reason. When I first started out, my schedule was all over the place. It was grab them when I can, see people. There were times when you would be in school and you'd forget something and drive home, get your cleats, come back over, see a client, drop them off to your school. You forgot something else or whatever. Like
Right.
it was juggling and it was hard, you know. When I started to implement time management and create some structure, it made it a lot easier to stay on track, to be able to figure in things, to decide whether I wanted to do, do I want to do networking that day, or do I want, when you
Right.
have more time, you can make more time for business things. I also believe that you have to, in your own mind, not see some of the tasks of the entrepreneur as work.
Right.
The networking to me is socializing. I'm just socializing with a focus on talking about what I do,
Hmm.
learning what other people do. It's not, it's like socializing with a purpose, the
Right.
purpose to connect with other people that could be strategic partners for you.
Right. I think that, well, yeah, that's important too. I think for people who want to be business owners and own a business, that is the right mindset, because you do have to recognize that if this is what you want to do, you do need to kind of blend your life and your personal life. If you
Hmm.
are not somebody who wants to do that, then it might just be better to get a 9 to 5 job,
Right,
and you work your hours, and then when you go home, that's your time, and
right,
that's the end of that.
right,
So that is important to recognize that within yourself first, and make that distinction on like what's important to you, how do you want to spend your time, and
right.
if you're not somebody who's going to enjoy kind of being on the clock 24/7, whether it's work or not technically work related. If you're not somebody who's going to enjoy that, then
Hmm.
maybe you just want to do a
Nine to
standard
five, yeah.
standard job. Yeah.
The other thing is, when you're networking, never underestimate the power of who you're talking to. Like a lot of times I think people make mistakes when they go to chamber events or things like that, and they're like, "Oh, I've got to look for this specific type of person." And they don't talk to the person that maybe is too young. Like they wouldn't talk maybe to you for some reason.
Right.
Let's just say, why do they not talk to you?
Right.
Do they think you have no, you couldn't possibly have a book of business that would serve them,
Right.
right? So there was a story I heard told in BNI where this young girl, probably around your age, was there, and she was what was she doing? I forget what her field was. She was there as a, like, say, an insurance person or whatever. And the financial advisor was like, "Oh, why do we let her in the chapter? She's too young. What could she possibly do for me? Blah, blah, blah," right? So he was like griping about the fact that she would be considered in his power team, the financial power team.
Hmm.
Insurance and finances go together. And it come to find out, one of the, I guess, people in the chapter that were in the leadership said, "Give her a chance. You don't know how you're going to build a relationship with her." And fast forward like a month or two later, the people that were kind of saying she might have been too young for the chapter were having to eat crow because she ended up coming into an inheritance.
Right.
She went to him for guidance, right?
Right.
And then like she decided something about some real estate that she would either buy or sell. The realtor then got some. So you
Right.
never know who it could be, and it could be the other way too. Like you have a very youth oriented focus to people in your specific age
Hmm.
group, right? And here I am talking on your podcast, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm your mother, but I have had
Well, I mean,
experiences.
I've 3 out of my 4 guests have not been my age, so I
Right.
do try to get a diverse group of people to come in, because I think, like you were saying, everybody does have a perspective that is worth listening to, and it's important to gather information from a variety of people, because that's how you
Right.
not only make sure you get the right information, it's how you get the right information for the right time, you know, because there's
And
different situations
and I
too.
think that what I saw in your first few podcasts was that my mission is accomplished. I knew early on as a parent that I can't be everything for everybody. I'm a Jackie of all trades, master of one, right?
Hmm.
I can wear so many hats, but I can't mentor you or any of my kids or other people about everything, but I can guide people because I like to help people, link and refer them to other people who
Right.
can help them. I'm not a financial advisor. Could talk to you about budgeting and maybe some of the things I've learned along the way, but you need to talk to a financial advisor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not all these other things. I know enough to probably be dangerous, but I know enough to know when I'm practicing outside the scope of my license and to refer you to someone else.
Right.
And I think that you picked that up, and I'm really impressed by the man that you are now. You seek out the answers that you want from, whether it's YouTube people or people in your real life, and you see the value of their experience, and that I think is key to success as being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. So last thing, um, I've asked everybody this, and I'm interested to see what you say because I will actually see it. But what do you plan for the next 10 years? Like, what's your 10-year vision if you're able to do everything that you can and no obstacles? What would you like to be doing in 10 years?
Well, believe it or not, late in the game, I listened to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and there was one line in there. I'm blanking on his name. Do you remember his name?
Um,
Uh,
I
do you
don't.
have it?
Was it Richard?
Richard?
No, it wasn't.
No, Gary? Oh my gosh, it's so
Um,
bad. Anyhow, he
Robert. Robert.
Robert,
Robert Kiyosaki.
yeah,
That was his name.
Robert Kiyosaki. He said something in the book where it says when he realized that his money was employees,
Okay.
like to view your money as little employees and investing back into your business or the legacy that you want to leave. When I think of that, I think of, like, mistakes that I've made with money, misallocated money, or frivolous spending and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, I got rid of all those employees. What could I have done or been or whatever? And you can't go backwards. You can only
Right.
take what you learn now and move forward. So that said, like, I have what I have now. As I always say, I bought a building, I bought a mortgage.
Right.
Sorry,
Right.
guys. But there's the potential for that to continue to invest in itself instead of me, pissing it away to the another landlord. It now becomes part of this whole portfolio that I create. I it's a smaller building, so as we
Right.
grow and get more clinicians, we're going to need bigger space.
Hmm.
So who knows, we might have a satellite office somewhere else at some point. And that, or also what goes hand in hand with what I do is a lot of things that are meditative and relaxing and stuff like that. Maybe some upcoming retreats possibly, or
Yeah.
develop programs or curriculum that people can do as a self-study.
So
Not
ultimately, your goals are more
evolve.
so evolving your practice and evolving your portfolio too, personally, right? Like
Yeah.
beginning to invest more and kind of leave
My
grow a
mission
legacy.
is to travel around van lifestyle with my dog. And you guys can be back here working, and
All
I'm
right.
going to go travel.
Well, we'll do that. All right. Before we go, do you have anything you want to like plug? Just tell people where they can find you, anything.
Yeah, so you can find me on dynamicinterventionllc.com. That's our website. Our Instagram is dynamic.intervention. That's a work in progress. I'm good on Facebook, but not so much on that. And then Dynamic Intervention Wellness Solutions is on Facebook. Those are our business pages. And we will be having a health and wellness expo in the fall in Wappinger Falls, New York. So if you follow along on the business pages and or you are a health and wellness professional and would like to be part of that, hit me up.
All right. Awesome. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah.